What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. USF game is tomorrow, so we are going to go deep on this game on USF's roster, and no better person to do that than a blast from the past, Tito Benach. You may remember him from writing for CanesInSight a decade ago, back in 2013, a guy who then worked for the Bulls 24/7, went to USF. Very, very familiar with that roster, worked media with them for a while. Now with the Action Network as a producer, he is really the foremost expert on both teams, right? He's a guy that can talk intelligently about the matchup from both sides, which is a unique perspective. And he did an awesome job breaking this game down, soup to nuts. So you guys are going to really, really enjoy that interview. If you need people to break down your case, no better than Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. Hop in, Pete. Back in the saddle. It's been a week. How's it feel, man? Tito, man, this is the 2013 CanesInSight roster back when we were a rinky-dink operation, not this studio show you have here today.
Yeah, and 2011 CCNN Live at Columbus, man. So we go way back to high school, and it's even way back, man. He's a year younger than me, but I went to school with him growing up too. So always like to talk ball with Tito, USF, because he's still got love for the Canes. He follows both programs closely, but like you said, he has a nice perspective of it because he's covered the team. He's still a fan of the team. So he's seen it, the program have some ups and downs, but there's real excitement up there right now. So happy for him to have this opportunity to talk with us.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's jump into it. Tito Benach, former writer, Bulls 247, current producer, Action Network, breaking down the game. All right, we are bringing the old CanesInSight band back together circa 2013. I think Peter was a freshman in college, and our guest, Tito Thomas Benach, was in high school, right?
That is correct. Yeah, senior in high school.
Breaking all kinds of labor laws with my man, Tito Benach. He has since moved on to USF for college, writer for your Bulls 247, and is now a producer at the Action Network. So he's doing a lot of big things, but remains probably the biggest crossover fan of the Bulls and the Hurricanes. So no one better to break down this game than Tito. How you doing?
Great, man. Great. It's good to be back in this podcast. I think the last time we were on a podcast, we were talking about Stacey Coley and Alex Collins, RIP. But it's great to talk with you guys. Obviously a big matchup, and excited to break it down.
Yeah, no, a lot of people think this could be the game where it gets tight for Miami and it gets a little scary. Obviously the Alabama game looming large in the minds of a lot of Canes fans and Canes coaches, players talking about it as well. You've seen this program through all kinds of eras. What's the overall excitement level of USF fans here in the goalless era?
I think it's real. I think it's a mix of two different things. I think it's number one. I think Alex Golesh has proven that he's a modern head coach who's an aggressive style of offense, the veer and shoot offense with up tempo. And then the other part of it is it finally feels like USF is getting its ducks in a row in terms of on-campus stadium, which is supposed to, I believe, break ground this year and then be ready for 2026, as well as, potentially aligning themselves for joining the ACC or joining the Pac-12 or joining one of these major Power 4, Power 5 conferences, however you see. The roster has improved from where it was under Jeff Scott, where it got really, really bad. And also, I think kind of the end of the Charlie Strong era, Strong kind of started sacrificing skill and athleticism for size, and that became apparent in, a lot of his losses. So I think, Golesh has done a good job of effectively using the transfer portal in certain spots for USF while also, finding some local talent that has actually fared well for them.
When you say on-campus stadium, are we looking at something kind of like what UCF has size-wise? Like what's the – I've not followed USF. I didn't know they were doing an on-campus stadium. So what are we looking at here?
So it's going to be directly in front of the university. It's where I believe the Fowler Fields are. I think it's a little bit bigger than UCF's from what I understand. And I think a lot more, not to be a UCF hater, even though I am, it's more correctly designed, if that makes any sense. It's supposed to fit more. It has the bleacher seats. It has nice seats as well. And I think, when UCF did it, they did it in a rush just because they wanted to say they had one. I think there's been a lot of meticulous planning for USF when it comes to this on-campus stadium that's supposed to happen in a couple years.
All right, so switching gears to this team, we'll go position by position, but overall, how do you see this team in relation to prior USF teams? And you're familiar with ACC football. Where does this team stack up talent-wise for an ACC fan looking at it?
Yeah, look, I think, one of the biggest things going for this USF football team is the returning production. A lot of returning starters on the offensive side of the ball. That's headlined by obviously their quarterback, Byron Brown, who had a tremendous season last year. Dual threat guy who showed in the Alabama game that he can impact a game with his legs. I think for right now, the USF passing attack isn't where it wants to be. And for what Byron Brown is as an athletic quarterback, I think he can be a little inconsistent with his passes, but overall as a roster, I think, this is kind of, I guess, if you really want to say maybe year one for Golesh, as the phrase kind of goes, it's year -1 for some of these coaches. I think Golesh did a really, really good job of kind of picking and choosing and plucking a couple of these SEC transfers over from whether it be Tennessee or other programs and kind of fitting them into spots where USF really needed the size. So I think in comparison to an ACC squad, I know this is kind of funny. I think they're definitely a better roster than Florida State right now. I know that that's not a high bar anymore, but I think, for Miami's sake, in terms of comparison, I think this USF squad would probably be either middle of the ACC, maybe a little bit lower than that. But I think they would fare well in that conference, but, not like an 8 or 9 win program, but maybe 7, 8.
So look at the quarterback, Byron Brown. He's someone I'd heard maybe an NFL type player. I know I was watching at Alabama. I didn't see him throw the ball a ton. I did see the size. He was breaking tackles from Alabama defensive players, linebackers. He looked pretty stout in that respect. Arm looked good. Didn't throw it a whole lot. How do you see him as an NFL type prospect?
Yeah, look, I think it's silly because, it's such a wild comparison to make right now. And so when I say this, I know a lot of eyes are going to jump, but he has a similar build profile to Josh Allen. Big, stocky quarterback who can hurt you with his legs, has a strong arm. The accuracy is probably the thing that needs the most work. Right now with this USF offense, it's getting the ball out quick, a lot of quick decisions, throwing to a spot, throwing down the sideline, down the line of scrimmage, quick screens, things of that nature. So when it comes to kind of the processing, there's still some questions in regards to that when that first read isn't there. But I think, if he can continue to develop that accuracy, if he can continue to show that, he can make a play past that first read. Yeah, there's something there. I don't doubt that. Now, has he faced a top tier defense this year yet? I think he did in Alabama. I think Alabama defensively still has a lot of NFL guys. And, he missed some throws that could have changed the way that game looked. Specifically, I believe in the second quarter or third quarter, he had 2 deep go routes that if he connects on one of those, USF takes a lead and that game has a little bit of a different feel to it in terms of momentum. But the accuracy, I would say, is probably still the biggest weakness with Byron Brown.
In terms of throwing, just on the throwing part, where is he most dangerous throwing the ball? Where is he? Some guys specialize in the deep ball. Some guys like to, stick the ball and show off their arm strength. Some guys like to throw on the run and make plays that way. Where do you think he's most dangerous just as a passer?
Yeah, I think it's still with him. It's still mostly in the pocket. I think he has the ability to make throws on the run if necessary. I think, though, that, just because he's such a capable athlete, the moment he gets skewed outside of the pocket, he probably has a tendency to want to tuck and run it just naturally. USF has improved their offensive line. They returned most of the starters and they added one in Tennessee transfer, RJ Perry. But I think for him, he wants to be kind of operating in that middle level. He wants to be working on the 10 to the 20, 20-yard throws in that area. And then when those start hitting, then they start potentially going up into deep shots. So USF has, I don't want to say any elite receivers, but they do have a stable of receivers. So that kind of helps him when it comes to kind of being able to layer throws. But a lot of this is still kind of veer and shoot, throwing to a spot, getting out the ball quick.
Switching to the running game, pulling up the stats here. 4.2 yards a carry last year, about 61st in the country. Obviously, a lot of volume because the quarterback's also a runner. You have Naquan Wright at running back, who Miami fans may remember. Carroll City grad, ended up going to Florida, now at USF. The running game, and you can include Brown in this because obviously he's a big part of that. How do you see the running game shaking out?
Yeah, this is going to be an equal test to how it went against Alabama. You could argue maybe Miami has a better defensive line than Alabama. I'm not totally familiar with Alabama's defensive line at the current moment, but I know Miami has the Tyler Barons, the Simeon Barrows, Elijah Alstons of the worlds, and Akeem Mesidor. This is going to be a tough test for the USF offensive line. And I think, for Golish, he wants to maintain that level of physicality. I think, in his benefit, Naquan Wright and Teron Keith, who's the other running back, they're both guys who kind of lean into the physical nature. They have some speed, but, both can kind of run between the tackles, and they do enjoy doing that. So I'm curious. I think Alabama was able to turn that water off pretty quickly during that game. And it kind of hampered the offense so much that, and I said this earlier, but USF with their tempo, with the way they play and the way their offense works, it can be a double-edged sword. It can be up-tempo, quick, things are happening, offense is moving down the field, or it turns into going fast nowhere. So really quick 3 and outs. If the run isn't there, then it kind of puts them behind the sticks, and now Byram is having to make 15-yard throws, 18-yard throws where the defense is kind of waiting on it. So I think this is going to be a tough test for USF's offensive line. I think Miami has shown that they have the bodies and the depth at that position to really rotate and get penetration. So curious to see how Golish schemes this one up.
Yeah, looking at and Pete, I keep asking the questions. You got the next one, but looking at the sack percentage from last year, USF 107th in the nation, meaning bad when it comes to protecting the passer, avoiding sacks. Do you see this being kind of a scheme thing as far as how they try to avoid guys like a Barron and an Alston? I mean, what's the plan? You mentioned this, the key matchup. What's the plan? I know you're not in the meeting room, but if you're to avoid that mismatch perhaps on paper of pass blocking versus pass rush.
Yeah, look, I think this is a situation where Golish is going to want to try and do what, the offense seems to always want to do, which is get the ball out quickly and make Miami make plays in the open field, right? Really, I will say this. I think this is going to be the toughest test to this point for Miami's secondary, right? I don't think Florida really ever got the passing game going against Miami, and obviously Ball State and FAMU are, not really something we want to consider when it comes to that. But I do think, the USF and the way their scheme works is they're going to want to get the ball, and use all of the field. And whether that be slot receiver, tight end, or main wide receiver, obviously last year USF had a receiver, Sean Atkins, go for 1,000 yards. He hasn't had the hottest start this year, but they do have a couple of other capable receivers that can make plays in space. They're not, game breakers, but guys who, if they get the ball on a crossing route and a short screen, they can make some things happen if everything breaks right. So I think that's the strategy for USF coming into it. I think you really, really want to get receivers, the ball at the line of scrimmage with space to work, because I just cannot imagine that USF's offensive line is going to want to be holding up 3, 4, 5 seconds with the bodies Miami has on the D-line.
Tito, I wanted to ask you about Sean Atkins. You just brought him up. Pretty cool story. Started as a walk-on over there at USF and 1,000-yard season last year, and one of Byron Brown's favorite targets. I mean, how would you describe his game? I mean, you heard a lot last year with Xavier Restrepo, Canes fans complaining, well, he's putting up those numbers because they're feeding him the ball. And now we've seen, not only with Jakari Brown in the bowl game, but with Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo is just one of the best receivers in the country. Right. Atkins, is he a guy that is he just getting open all the time? Does he have ability with the ball in his hands? I mean, talk to us a little bit about his game.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to ignore the Xavier Restrepo comparison. And I think there's similarities and some dissimilarities. I think, for one, I think Restrepo's a lot more athletic, and I think Restrepo is probably faster. I think where Atkins is reliable is strong hands. I think he is a consistent, reliable receiver who has shown a propensity to be someone that QBs like. That he is not exclusive to Byron Brown, although last year it seemed like those two really, really developed a really good relationship when it comes to being on the field and finding each other. Atkins is reliable. He is a great route runner. What he doesn't have in the size and speed combo, he makes up with excellent routes and consistent hands. So he's someone that, is he going to hit you deep on a go route? Probably not, but he's someone that, 8-yard out, 7-yard dig, things of that nature, he can make, a DB really, really have to be on their P's and Q's against him just because he's consistent. And USF is going to try and target him just because they know how reliable he is as a receiver.
So just before we move on to the defense, just big picture, USF's offense against Miami's defense. I know, again, both sides probably more than anybody as far as both teams. What matchup, if you're on the USF side, do you say, hey, we might have an advantage here, or this is something that might cause Miami some problems?
Yeah, so I think it really comes back to tackling an open space. I think the one thing that is undeniable about Alex Golesh is he is a very creative offensive mind. He is not afraid to go forward on 4th and shorts on his own side of the field. He is, has a very, very wide open passing attack. And, I think sometimes in college football, we kind of tend to see variations of the same offense, kind of staying between the hashes, 8-yard outs, 9-yard outs. Golesh will get really, really creative, and he can, line up receivers on top of each other, 3 at a time, 4 at a time. And so that's where I think really for Miami, it has to be about being sound fundamentally and reading your keys, because, it's not just like, the big runs that gash you. It's the continuous momentum and the tempo that I think really might concern me. USF operates at a very fast tempo. That is the one thing that I cannot undersell them on. They go quick, and it can hurt them, but also if they get a couple big gash plays and your defense is trying to make subs and you have to make calls quickly on the defensive side, that's somewhere where I don't think Miami's really been tested yet in that regard. So I'm curious to see. I think that's the area where I think USF has a significant chance to turn this game on its head.
All right, before we switch gears to the defensive side, want to shout out a tremendous opportunity for Canes fans. That is No Fee Friday. So today, Friday, when you're listening to this, go on MiamiHurricanes.com and get your tickets without paying any fees. Load up. You got Wake Forest, you got Duke, you got Virginia Tech, and of course you have Florida State. Buy your tickets now that are available. No fees. Why pay fees when you could just load up on all your tickets for the season? Friday, this is September 20th, today, Friday, if you're listening to this, no fees on MiamiHurricanes.com. Get your tickets. Unbelievable opportunity. You will not regret No Fee Friday. All right, Tito, coming back here on the defensive side of the ball. Now, this was
oops, sorry.
Turn it to Peter for a second. Look at that.
I'm trying to get this right. Sorry, guys.
Tremendous downgrade.
High quality producer here.
That's why I'm not working for Action Network, man.
Oh man. So defense wise, not a good defense last year statistically. Offense was good, defense was not. Let's start with the pass rush, because statistically this was not a very good pass rush in the 120s in terms of sack percentage. So not a good pass protection unit, not a good pass rush unit. The offense was good regardless because of the pace and other things that they did well. Defense was not very good. Pace maybe hurts them in that respect, just statistically. But when I watched them against Alabama, they were getting to the quarterback. They were getting to Milrow. They were getting him off his spot. They were causing some problems, particularly number 90, who you know who he is probably, right?
Yeah.
Who's number 90?
Decarius Hawthorne.
He was pretty active. Again, I don't know if it was because Alabama was missing its starting tackles and they were just out of sorts, or USF just really improved on the pass rush, or a little of both. What do you see from USF's pass rush this year compared to what we may have seen last year, at least statistically?
Yeah, no, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. USF's defense last year was putrid. And every key stat, they were horrible. And I don't know if it's a calling card of like kind of the Todd Orlando defense is like year one is just awful, and then year two is supposed to be better. And it looks that way thus far, right? You mentioned a great point. Alabama kind of down tackles in that game. I believe their right tackle in that game, I don't know his name, but he was called for like 6-7 penalties, holdings, illegal procedures, all the, everything. And USF was able to get pressure on Jalen Milrow. And that kind of kept the game within the balance. And, before Alabama kind of broke away in the fourth quarter. Darius Hawthorne is the name that I think I want to focus on the most right now, just because through 3 games, he looks like a guy. He looks like a significant addition to the defense. He's getting pressure. I think the front 6 has really, really gotten better. They've added some talent there. Rashad Chaney was a defensive tackle that they've had who has really improved and kind of anchored the center of that defensive line for USF. So, look, this is another situation where I think USF, they've got their work cut out for them, right? Miami's offensive line has some great players. I don't have to go through the names. Obviously, Miami fans know that. But, it's not going to – I don't think it's going to be as fruitful or as easy as it was against Alabama, right? Like, I think Miami we know this about Miami. Mario Cristobal takes pride in the offensive line. It's a strength of that unit. So I'm really curious to see how Todd Orlando tries and dials up some pressure against Miami.
Tito, looking at that D-line, it looks like they're a really well-coached unit. Of course, Kevin Patrick, former Cane, coaching that unit, and very disruptive against Alabama. Like you said, it doesn't seem like the size is there yet. It looks like, to me, that might be the biggest issue against a really big Miami front there. But looking at the linebackers, early in the season, Cam Ward's put a ton of pressure on linebackers in coverage, the way that he uses his eyes and kind of moves defenders in the middle of the field. Mac Harris, from what I saw against Bama, looked like a guy who has some sideline-to-sideline ability. But how would you rate that linebacker unit in coverage, and just like, can they run, really, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, look, it's an area for USF that had been a weakness, I want to say, for a significant time, right? There were, I can't remember the last USF linebacker that really had NFL potential.
I'll tell you, who was it? He was DVD's Sam. What was it?
Sam Barrington.
Sam Barrington.
Sam Barrington.
Packers,
that's a blast from the past.
That was before we were.
That's USF upsetting Notre Dame in Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And Kelly turning purple. Right. Yeah.
That was a kid Miami wanted, and then USF beat us for flat out. That was like one of the
on signing day,
recruiting battles I could think of, where USF just beat Miami flat out for a kid Miami wanted.
Yeah, that was the Skip Holtz era of USF, which is funny that he actually ended up beating Miami one time in 2011. I was a child at that game.
Shannon was fired, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Shannon was fired right after that game. I forgot about that.
Thank you, Skip Holtz.
Look, no, I think you make a great point. I think the linebacker room has gotten better. I think Mac Harris is a guy who has the versatility that you need to have as a college football linebacker, right? Cover in space, be able to come up and lay the lumber at times. I still think at times, even in the Alabama game, when that game got away from them, I don't think that linebacker unit was really put into space a lot, if that makes any sense. I think, Alabama, through 3 quarters of that game was really, really trying to set the tone via the run game, and it wasn't working. And so that kind of put those linebackers in an easy position where they're just kind of inching up. And then obviously in the fourth quarter, after, the offense just couldn't get any points, Alabama was kind of able to exploit the secondary. And then I believe Alabama's running back, I can't remember his name, I think it's Miller or something, broke like a 40-yard run. For all things considered, USF surrendered 199 rushing yards to Alabama. Before that big run in the fourth quarter, that number was, I don't even think, in the hundreds before the fourth quarter started. And, when you consider what Alabama is and what they try to be, it's a pretty impressive performance, all things considered, despite, the final score. I think when it comes to Miami's front line, it's going to be a tough test, especially with a tight end like Elijah Arroyo and what you've seen from him. I don't think I don't think USF has seen a high-quality tight end like Elijah Arroyo this season. And so I'm really curious to see how Todd Orlando kind of circles him. So if I had to say, I think they're going to probably want to be in nickel a good bit, just because of the fact that, look, hey, we'll take our losses in the run game, but we are not going to let Cam Ward and Elijah Arroyo just absolutely dominate us. If Miami wants to beat us, then they're going to have to run it down our throats, and we'll see how that goes.
Defensive backfield wise, when I watched the Alabama game, I was struck by how close USF's DBs were lined up in the press on Alabama, not showing a ton of respect, or at least showing a lot of confidence in their own guys. Is that how they normally play? What can you tell me about USF's DBs and how aggressive they typically are?
Yeah, look, it's another area where last year it was god awful. And I think they landed a premier transfer in Deshaun Rucker from Tennessee. He's a guy who's really been anchoring the secondary for USF. I think, look, everybody knows how DVD coaches, right? He wants to have guys have hands on receivers. This is not, giving receivers 7-8 yards of cushion, and I don't expect that to be the case against Miami. I just don't think they can afford to play that way. That being said, I think, through 3 quarters, for the most part, against Alabama, it looked okay. Southern Miss was also having some success in the passing game. There were, I forget the third down conversion rate that Southern Miss had, but there were a lot of drives that Southern Miss was going into the red zone. And then, a comedy of errors would happen for Southern Miss, and USF would end up with the ball. I believe on one specific occasion, a defensive tackle had a pick, and then I think Southern Miss fumbled a snap at one point. So, yeah, I don't think I can operate as a USF fan. This is an area where I think there is tentative confidence. I don't know that this is going to be the best receiving core, or at least in comparison to Alabama, the best receiving core they're going to face to this point in the season. I'm curious to see how who they choose to turn or focus on in terms of turning off the water, right? Is it Restrepo? Is it Arroyo? Is it Jacoby George? I think USF's going to have to kind of pick their poison with that. Tafik Bayard is the safety for USF, who's been pretty impressive as well. He's a guy that's kind of held down the fort in the back end. I'm really curious because we've seen from Miami, they're not afraid to go 5 wide. They're not afraid to, really have a downfield passing attack.
Tito, a quick question in terms of just in general with the hype and the buildup on this game up there in Tampa. In your time, not only covering the team, but still, being a fan and following them to this day, where does this matchup rank in just like the excitement level? We've seen this, largest student section expected this weekend. They're opening up the upper deck up there in Raymond James. So obviously there had to have been a ton of excitement about Bama, but that was an away game. So where does this one stack up?
This is big. I think for USF, this is a kind of, hey, we haven't had a big home game, a big in-state rivalry home game for that matter, in a long time. I think in the second year of Jeff Scott, or second or first year, I can't remember, Florida came to town with Anthony Richardson and kind of blew the doors off of USF. Excuse me. That game was close for a little bit, but then I think eventually UF pulled away. And there was an understanding in that game going in. USF roster was not up to par. I think it's different now. I think this is year 1 for Golish, not technically year 2, but not year -1, as I said earlier. And so I think there is significant optimism and belief that they can hang around based upon the offense, based upon the roster improving, and the fact that the program seems to be doing everything it needs to do to put themselves in a significant position moving forward for the future. It's a big game. And to my knowledge, I can't recall, it would have to be 2016 when Florida State came to town against Quentin Flowers. Obviously, that was a game that, in similar fashion, Florida State kind of just wiped the floor with USF in that game from start to finish. But I think there is significant hype in this game, and the hope for USF fans is that this is not just another flop. They want to see them compete and win.
Crowd-wise, you mentioned we're talking about the hype here. I mean, what kind of numbers are we talking about with this thing filled up?
Look, when USF is humming and they have the local community genuinely invested, I think this can be upwards of a 50,000, 60,000 crowd. That stadium can fill it. Now, if we want to talk how many of that is going to be Miami fans on Saturday, that's a separate question. I think, in the occasions where I went to a 2013 USF game against Miami, I went to the Florida State 2016 game against USF. Miami has a significantly strong fan base across the country and across obviously the state of Florida. I think they're going to show up. I think this is the highest level of genuine belief USF football has had. Ooh, that's a good question. Since 2017, probably, like easily since 2017. And that's just because it feels like, the roster, the coaching, and the belief is there.
Did Pete notice that Tito asked himself a question in his head, and then he said, "Wow, that's a good."
That
question.
was a good one, man. That was a great one.
It was tough. I had to really roll back the memory there.
And listen, for all the fans listening, we always get the comments when we bring the opposing reporters on that say, "Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a hater and all that." But Tito still has love for the Canes too. So he a lot of what he's saying, he understands what Miami has on the other side. So he's being a very good neutral here, even though he's a USF guy.
Yes, yeah, I keep up with both programs pretty intently. Obviously, born and raised a Canes fan, and then went to USF. But I'm excited, man. I think, look, there's statements to be made for both teams, right? Like, if Miami comes out and dominates the way that people expect them to, then I think it's just another, chip on their shoulder and another thing to add to the resume. These are the types of games where you've seen other programs kind of stumble through, right? Oklahoma versus Tulane. You would think Oklahoma would just blow the doors off of a program like that, but they didn't. So I think there is something to be said for Miami kind of coming in and making a statement that, hey, this is a significant program on the move upward. And I think for USF, it's the same thing. It's time to prove for USF that this isn't just, a fable or, a cute little story. They want to be considered a top 3-4 program in the state.
I was about to say USF has a really good team this year. It looks like obviously a huge comeback win last week, but if USF can play this game tight, they may have a claim as the second or third best team in the state, depending on how they finish the season. So a lot to play for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as someone who is never going to give UCF credit, I don't see what's the deal with them. So I think USF's better than UCF.
The new big three in the flesh right there.
Yeah.
Hey, Tito, man, appreciate you. Check out the Action Network. All kinds of gambling news and notes. Get you the edge. Any shows you're producing, Tito, in particular, you want to hype up while you're here?
Yeah. Check out The Favorites, Tuesdays and Thursdays and Sundays, giving out NFL picks. We go live midday. It's also available on audio, Apple, Spotify. We're live on YouTube Tuesdays and Thursdays and Sundays, breaking down NFL picks. We also just debuted a brand new college football show with college football picks, only college sports there. It's called the BBOC, Big Bets on Campus. And they will be definitely breaking down Miami USF this weekend.
You're the BBOC over here, the Big Benach on campus. How about that, Tito? Appreciate you joining us, man. Show that. Let's see the Action Network logo, man. There you go.
It could have been
other side, man.
Other side. It could have been a UM shirt. It could have been a UF shirt, but I said I'm going to play this neutral.
So. Keep it professional. That's the difference from a high school student to a seasoned pro media professional. What a journey. Tito, you're the man. Appreciate you joining us.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, this an insight to the Canes, and we ain't playing no games. Joaquin said dominate, so that's what we do. Home of the legends and 7th floor crew, down in Miami where hurricanes brew. You here for the rumors, we bring you the news, cause it's all about the you, and nobody do it like CanesInSight. 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 It's CanesInSight.